Hello and welcome to The Sky at Night.
This month's programme is coming from Stonehenge, where we've joined the crowds to celebrate the summer solstice. In just a few hours' time, the sun will rise in a very special location over the Heelstone.
People have argued about the significance of this place and its connection to astronomy for more than 100 years. And we've looked at the connection between these magnificent stones and the skies above our heads, particularly at the moon. The creation of Stonehenge by our Neolithic ancestors still inspires us thousands of years later. Why was it built? What was it for? And is the controversial link with the moon real or imaginary? Stonehenge still perplexes us today. It was around 5,000 years ago that the first architects on this site built the grass bank and the ditch, with 56 post holes around the inner ring. Then came the stones. The blue stones are thought to have come from West Wales, a feat that still impresses. These stones have been rearranged many times in what some speculate was an attempt to chart the celestial calendar. The striking sarsen stones are from closer to home. They're from Marlborough, just 20 miles away. But this is our idea of how Stonehenge would have looked in its prime. Professor Clive Ruggles is a world expert in the study of astronomy in ancient civilizations. Clive is going to help The Sky at Night pin down the link between Stonehenge, astronomy, and in particular, the moon. The first mystery to solve is that of the avenue, a track in the landscape, which lines up on its approach to Stonehenge with the solstice sun.
Clive, you've brought us to a field, which I'm assured is very important for Stonehenge. And actually there's a feature here called the avenue, but I'm finding it hard to really sense this feature. Tell me a bit about it.
Yes, you don't see a lot in the long grass. You're actually standing in it. Chris is actually standing in a ditch on one side of it. The other ditch is over there. So it's a long avenue that led straight up to Stonehenge from this direction. This clearly was the way you'd come on important occasions. I should say, you don't see much here, but if you had a look at it from an aerial photo, you'd see it very clearly.
The avenue, far from being created just anywhere, is based on a natural feature. Recent excavations have shown it to follow the line of a channel carved by glaciers. It's this natural alignment that first connected this landscape with the summer and winter solstice suns, and it might even have been the reason that Stonehenge was here in the first place.
If you're somewhere in this landscape, some hundreds of years before there's anything here, and you see these striations and you see the sun on the shortest day of the year setting in line with them, surely that to you is going to make it seem like the most special place. It's going to be a sacred place. Because it's already lined up with this feature that we care about. To us it's a coincidence of nature, but to them, what more can you ask for to show that this is a really special place? And perhaps that's why Stonehenge is where it is, because this is a place that acquires that significance to do with the sunset all through. And then gradually people build things. They build a ditch and a bank and some timber things, and then eventually it gets enhanced and turns into what we now see.
The Sky at Night has been to Stonehenge before.
Hello to the first ever Sky at Night from Stonehenge. It is in fact midsummer morning. There are a great many people here, as you can see, and in a very few moments the Druids are going to begin their main procession.
In 1972, Sir Patrick Moore investigated the link between Stonehenge and the moon. Patrick wanted to know if the monument could be used to chart the lunar calendar. Patrick also saw a magnificent sunrise the day before the summer solstice.
Through that great arch, the Heelstone in the distance, the alignment absolutely perfect as the sun comes up to its rising point over the top of the stone. And there it is. And there are very many people who have never actually seen this. I've never myself seen it before, and it really is a superb sight.
In fact, the sunrise over the Heelstone can be seen for a couple of days either side of the solstice, so you don't have to join the Druids on the day itself. Radio astronomer Professor Gerald Hawkins was one of the advocates of the idea that Stonehenge could be used to chart eclipses and the movements of the moon.
the Aubrey holes. 56 of them. A significant number?
Very, very, of course, the most critical number for the moon. It's 3 nodal revolutions of the moon's orbit. When the Stonehenge people came here, they started with these holes, the ditch, the bank, and this circle. Because of the 56 Aubrey holes, and because of the alignments here at Stonehenge, it could be said to be more a moon observatory than an observatory for the sun. And just as the sun rises over the heel-stone at midsummer, the moon rises over the heel-stone at midwinter.
If this theory is true, then the builders of Stonehenge would have achieved a remarkable degree of astronomical sophistication. After all, the moon's hard to pin down. Its movements seem to have a touch of lunacy about them, and that's because of its orbit. Well, if bits of Stonehenge really are aligned with the movements of the moon, then the builders must have understood some quite complex geometry. So let's see if we're as good as they were. I've got here the Earth, and we're going to need the orbit of the moon.
So here's the orbit of the moon. Now it's slightly tilted with respect to the Earth's orbit around the sun, which is very ably held by Clive over there. And we'll exaggerate that tilt for the purposes of this demonstration.
I'm going to bring in the moon and put it directly opposite the sun so that it's in the full moon phase. Now the moon takes 27 days to do one complete lap of the Earth and end up where it started back at full moon.
But of course, while the moon's been doing that, we've all moved relative to the sun. So we're actually over here by now.
And that means that the moon is no longer in the full moon phase when it's at this point. It has to move on a couple of days to be aligned with the sun.
Now, if that was all that was going on, building Moonhenge would be easy because the moon would rise and set at the same points on the horizon every single month. So you'd only need a couple of stones and the job would be done. But things are more complicated than that.
The complication is something called precession, and that makes this experiment a little more cumbersome.
Right, so I'm going to get out the way and we'll hold the Earth from down here.
So all precession is a wobble, and that means that the moon's orbit, which is tilted, moves around and the position of full moon gradually sinks lower. And it takes years for this to take place, but then it gets to its lowest point and then comes higher again and eventually returns to there.
And that's why it takes almost 19 years for the full moon to appear in our sky in the position where it started.
The rising and the setting of the moon seems to be unpredictable and unintuitive. It pops up all over the place, and that's because of its complex orbit. But we can chart the moon's movements, and it seems there might just be a connection to Stonehenge. Clive is going to help us map out what the moon is doing over the course of its 19-year cycle, but to set the scene, we first have to explain what the sun is doing. Well, Clive, we're on the most important part of Stonehenge, at least as...
Right on the axis.
Exactly. Yep. So why is this axis important? Why is this line important?
Well, because when you look along the axis, that's where the sun is rising on Midsummer's Day.
Just
on
over
the
this
solstice.
heel-stone. And that
Yep.
happens around midsummer.
So
It'll
that's
happen
happening
tomorrow.
around the summer solstice, exactly.
What about the rest of the year?
Right, well, if you were to come here every morning and look, you'd start to see the sun rising just a little bit further to the south every morning.
And then further to the south.
And then further to the south. Well, and it starts to get going faster. So by the time you get towards the equinox,
mid-September,
it's rattling along the horizon day by day. As we approach December, we slow down again and we arrive here.
And we meet the midwinter sun. So thank you, Paul. And if you were here any midwinter, you'd see sunrise in this position.
That's right. And any time in the year, you'll see sunrise rising somewhere on this arc of the horizon.
So in any given year, the sun has two extreme positions, its summer sunrise and its winter sunrise. The moon does something similar, but it takes 27 days, the lunar monthly cycle. We're going to mark out the extremes of moonrise over the course of a month. Pete is holding one lunar position and Chris is holding the other. But the complexities of the lunar orbit mean these points change position over the course of that 19-year cycle. Okay, so that's moonrise now, but of course over the course of a month, the moon rises at different positions.
Exactly. What you'd see is it moving up and down an arc on the horizon, just like the sun, but doing it up and down in 27 days.
And in fact, it would reach all the way to Pete, so at the most northerly extent of moonrise up there.
Yeah.
So, but that's true now, and of course, because of the complexities of the moon's orbit, we need to move Chris and Pete
Well, that's right,
occasionally.
because with the moon, these limit positions every month change gradually. So if we now roll the time forward to, eventually we're going to get to 2015, that's enough. Then we're going to reach a position here, and so by 2015, you'll find the moon is only going up and down between these inner limits. But then it starts to come back again, and if you both move out, we go over another almost 10 years, up
past,
to 2025,
past the point of midwinter sun.
Right out the same distance in the other direction. This is where the moon is going up and down in 2025. It's called a major standstill year, and in that time, then there are certain times every month when the moon is going to be rising extremely far south, much further south than the sun ever rises, and also much further north.
And those are the things that we think there might be alignments from Stonehenge.
That's where some things do appear to be aligned at Stonehenge.
Well, let's go into the centre of the circle and let's take a look at those alignments. Once every 19 years, the moon will rise at its most southerly position. Just over 9 years later, the moon will set at its most northerly position, in exactly the opposite direction. The question is, did Neolithic man use Stonehenge to mark these points? This reconstruction of Stonehenge shows 4 stones around the edge. Called the station stones, these seem to mark the limits where the most southerly moonrise and the most northerly moon set occur. Today, 2 of those stones are missing, so we've sent the Sky at Night team to mark the places where they once stood. So those are the station stones, and what exactly are they lined up with?
Well, most importantly, they're lined up with the axis of the monument. And that makes us think generally, we don't know exactly, but it makes us think generally they're probably put there much the same time as the big stones.
So how does that get us to the moon?
But the other way, they're pointing in 2 of these lunar directions, give or take a degree or 2. So to the northwest, they're pointing very close, in fact, to where the moon theoretically would set as far north as it ever sets. To the south, a little bit close to where the moon rises at its furthest south. The station stones do stand out. It's intriguing that they have this lunar direction to them.
People talk about a Neolithic observatory.
Right.
Is that justified? Can we go that far?
I don't like the word observatory because that implies that people built this for astronomy and that was its exclusive or main purpose, and I'm sure that wasn't the case. But neither was it the case that it had nothing to do with astronomy. Clearly this solstitial axis meant something. I don't think they were using it to time the longest day or the shortest day accurately in our terms at all. But I do think that they were timing seasonal ceremonies, festivities, other activities, which in their way of thinking of things would have been absolutely essential to keep all the seasonal things functioning. Ancestral spirits could be used to help regenerate crops or whatever needed to be done to bring things about successfully in the next year.
It's 7 o'clock now and they've just opened up the site to all the excited visitors. And also the sun's come out and the moon is rising behind us.
When you're in a landscape like this, it's hard not to think about what's happening in the sky relates to us here on Earth. For some, the moon rising or setting over the station stones is just an intriguing coincidence. Simon Banton is a keen amateur astronomer who dresses as a druid, but only to impart cosmic wisdom.
On the centre of the avenue, which looks off into the northeast in that direction, which is the direction of Solstice.
Simon has studied the moon's movements at Stonehenge, and for him, the coincidences add up to something more. But he's still got to convince Pete and Paul, who are a little sceptical.
You believe there's an association with lunar astronomy, you're not quite convinced.
There is. I'll tell you why I'm not convinced, because the way the sun comes up every day and the way it moves across the horizon, it's intuitive. But the moon isn't. The moon is quite a tricky devil to sort of predict.
It hops about.
It hops about a lot. So I have a great deal of difficulty with a culture that is trying to get all the details of the moon, and they can't write anything down.
No,
everything's done by word of mouth.
True.
Ah, yes. Firstly, I think that you may be underestimating the capability of oral tradition to transmit knowledge effectively. And I did stand here on the North Barrow in 2006 at the greatest southerly moonrise,
Right.
and watched the moon rise over the station stone that Hawkins identified as being a marker for that event.
Problem is that the markers are marking the positions where the moon sort of goes to its maximum extent and then back again.
Roughly. It's important to say roughly. The precision aspect of it may sometimes get overblown.
So that's a watch for at least 18.6 years,
Yes.
and probably for several of those cycles.
It is important to note, though, that if you do watch the moon rise over the heelstone, it can rise in a range that's to the right of it and
Yes,
to the left of it.
yes.
And when it rises over the heelstone in the same way that the sun does, then there will be an eclipse either of the moon that night at full moon, or 2 weeks later of the sun.
Which is quite incredible, really.
And now, now, I don't say that it's planned, but to notice it.
Yes.
To notice it and then go, well, that's interesting. Let's count, because these people have got counting. They're not idiots.
There are no written records from the people who built Stonehenge and who worshipped here, but they did leave behind their burial mounds called barrows, which contained some of the objects they treasured. At Stonehenge, Bush Barrow contained a truly amazing find, which shows that when Stonehenge was less than 1,000 years old, the people who lived here understood mathematics and geometry. Chris North has gone to the Wiltshire Museum in Devizes in search of the gold lozenge.
The Wiltshire Museum is full of artefacts found in ancient barrows. 200 years ago, well-meaning amateur archaeologists dug into the Bush Barrow, just half a mile from Stonehenge. Inside, they found some remarkable objects, which have challenged our perception of early Bronze Age people. Museum curator David Dawson looks after the objects and has a new exhibition opening this October. They've carefully recreated the gravesite, showing how all the objects were laid out.
This is sort of the centrepiece of our display. This is a reconstruction of the burial at Bush Barrow. He was a man who were told he's stout and tall. He's buried with an axe at the top, 2 daggers, a dagger fitting, and most important of all, the lozenge, the gold lozenge that was on his chest.
So the fact that he was buried with such artefacts and the daggers and axes and so on, he was an important chap in their society.
Absolutely. He must have been the top of the tree, so he's a chieftain, a warrior. We call him the Bush Barrow chieftain.
Right, and he was buried in this prominent place so that when they returned to Stonehenge for hundreds or thousands of years afterwards, they'd still see his
descendants
burial.
would see him and say, over on the hillside there, that's where our ancestors are buried.
Yeah. Upstairs, David has a special treat for us. The real 4,000-year-old gold lozenge.
Yes, it is rather special.
That is absolutely astonishing. So this is 4,000 years old, or thereabouts. So this looks like a solid piece of gold, but...
Actually it's not. It's less than 1 millimetre thick. It's been very carefully smoothed and thinned out. And it was mounted on a wooden backing plate. Today it's perspex, but can you just see that tiny piece of gold there? And can you see the way the edge is lapped over? It's just like wrapping a Christmas present.
Okay, but much more expensive.
Much more expensive
today.
and rather better than I can manage.
Yes.
But the amazing thing is you can see the lines. Look how straight they are.
They are dead straight.
And the zigzags in between. But clearly, whoever laid the design out knew about geometry, because it had to have been laid out using 3 concentric circles and then the straight lines of tangents, those circles, a bit like a Venn diagram.
So to get those triangles, so you get 4 zigs along one straight line, I mean, just the understanding of geometry and
mathematics.
Yeah. And the fact that this is so intricate, it says that it was far more
sophisticated. It seems to have been a very peaceful society, very stratified. Everyone knew their place.
These precious clues from objects thousands of years old paint a picture of a long-dead society, which was sophisticated, orderly, and intelligent, and capable of feats which are still impressive today.
So we're just having the opening ceremony right now. One of the leading druids has started the celebrations that you can hear.
It's a bit like church service I went to as a kid. We've had some communal singing, we've had a bit of a sermon, and everyone's happy to be here, and it's not raining, so maybe there's something in it. Every aspect of Stonehenge has attracted attention over the years, and that includes its sound. Dr. Rupert Till has created a model of Stonehenge as it was when it was complete. He says the sound inside the circle would have reverberated and echoed, being amplified by the stones and drawing everyone in. Paul is finding out how noisy Stonehenge can get.
So Rupert, here we are on a lovely summer solstice evening outside Stonehenge, and the one thing that strikes you is the beats coming out of there. The acoustics are good in there, and this is what you have been investigating, isn't it?
In my background sound, so what struck me immediately about this space was what it sounded like inside. And so we wanted to model that sound and hear what it might have sounded like 5,000 years ago.
So you have essentially developed a time machine, if you like, that allows people to go back, what, 5,000 years or so?
Yeah, about then, to when Stonehenge was first built, and possibly to look at how it changed over time, and also, of course, where the sun rose might change slightly in terms of where the stones are and where they weren't. So we can see that with our model.
Presumably sound was quite different if there was many more stones.
Yes, it really encloses you. When you go inside, you can't really see out, you can't really see in, and the sound is the same. It's really kept inside in the space. Sound would have been part of a ritual in the way it is in most cultures. It's not all about sound, it's one piece of a jigsaw.
Some of the revellers are settling down for the night, but all the time people are streaming into the site. The estimate is that more than 20,000 people will be here for sunrise. It's very lively, but it's friendly, and I think it's not too far from how our ancestors would have celebrated their solstice. Right now the sky's looking good, the moon is out, and it's only a few days away from being full. Pete, Lucy and I find a quiet spot away from the crowds. This month, we're launching our latest observing challenge, and it's all about Sir Patrick Moore's favourite object, the moon. Called the Moore Moon Marathon, we want it to be something everyone can take part in.
Pete, you've devised some real treats for us. What have you got in store?
Well, the moon is one of the loveliest things we can see in the night sky, and what I hope I've done is put together something which makes it very accessible for people.
Yeah, this is the nice thing about looking at the moon. I mean, finding the moon is the easiest astronomical task, and there are things you can notice even with the naked eye. So we start off in the first of the sections with the lunar seas, and you can see them just with the naked eye.
That's right. So the lunar seas, easy to pick out, and then we progressively move on. So we're moving into crater territory on the next section, and then into what I call shaded craters, the ones which you can see close to the terminator. So the first ones are easy. You can pick the first ones out on the full moon.
Give us a flavour. What are some of your favourite objects that are in there?
Well, I've had a bit of fun at the end of the marathon because I've got what I call lunar specials. Things like the basketball player in the moon.
Okay, I've never seen the basketball player.
The lunar seas, when you look at them, you can make shapes out of them. It's like seeing faces in clouds.
Right, like the man in the moon.
That's right. Basketball player is there, and he's throwing a ball, and the ball is the Mare Crisium.
Oh, off on its own on the right.
Yeah, that's right. And once you've seen these things, you can't stop seeing them.
So if you'd like to get involved, all you have to do is go to our website, bbc.co.uk/Sky at Night, and download the forms. Give it a go and see how far you get.
Already, the night is almost over, and we're joining the throng back at Stonehenge for sunrise. I'm going to try and get inside the circle with the drumming druids. From out here, we can't even see the heel stone, so the sun will rise over there in about 20 minutes. But it's only the people on the axis, the very middle of the monument, that actually get a good look. Lucy and the rest of the team have bagged a safer spot, away from the more enthusiastic celebrants.
So we're here waiting for the sunrise. We only have about 20 minutes to go now, and the excitement in this area is really picking up.
It is. It's heaving, isn't it? And it's remarkable how quickly the sky has brightened in the last just 10-15 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, you did wonder whether the sun was actually going to make an appearance. Actually, I still wonder that, because it's slightly drizzly.
So murky.
It's only very cloudy.
It's been a good evening. There's been really a good session here, I thought. I found the whole atmosphere really most interesting.
Incredible, yeah, it really was.
Well, it's just a couple of minutes before sunrise and the focus is still on the circle, but we're where the action is, with the heel stone right behind us. Well, I'm afraid there are no breaks in the cloud. It's another damp, drizzly summer solstice sunrise.
Now, Clive, I think you know what I'm going to say.
I do know what you're going to say.
So the sun has risen, yet there was almost no response from the crowd here. Why is that?
Well, does it surprise you there was no sun? What people are looking for is to actually see the sun. When you don't see the sun, they don't cheer. I mean, people in the Neolithic, I'm sure, were the same. This is why Stonehenge wasn't a calendar in our sense, because any day around what we know to be the solstice would have done. When they actually saw the sun, when the weather was good, that would be the day when they had the celebration.
So it really is just about the celebration. In fact, it kind of feels to me a bit like an endurance event. It's about staying up all night. Are you dedicated enough to stay up all night and be there for the sunrise? And if you are, you've done your celebration and you've paid your respect to the rising sun.
Oh, I think you're too negative. I think it's enjoyment. It's about enjoyment.
Sharing this often absurd but still entrancing event with 20,000 people has been quite an experience. It's one I will not forget, and I might well come back. The moon's role at Stonehenge will always provoke debate and speculation. After all, we'll never really know whether the position of the stones was deliberate or just a coincidence. But I hope whoever put them there would at least be pleased that we're still arguing about them all these thousands of years later.
In next month's programme, we celebrate a very special birthday as NASA's Curiosity rover reaches its first anniversary on Mars.
And so, until next month, from the sky at night, goodbye.
Double comedy from the Likely Lads in just a few moments this evening here on BBC4. And then our Thursday night drama tells the tragic story of the Busby Babes. United is here at 9. Stay with us.